Hey, everybody, welcome to Baxy's Musical Podcast. If you like what you hear today, rate it, follow it, share it, review it, pass it around to all your friends. Also, be sure to check out Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook for regular updates on upcoming episodes. There's some damn good ones on the way. Today, we're brought to you by Metro Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram at Chicopee. Visit Metro's state-of-the-art dealership right next to BJ's and Big Y on Memorial Drive, or visit metrojeep.com and drive home in your new Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram today. Now, let's not waste any more time. Let's get into my interview with Greg Norton from Husker and Ultrabomb on Baxy's Musical Podcast.
What is it? What is it?
It's Baxy's Musical Podcast. Resistance is useless.
In 1985, I walked into a now defunct record store that was just a few city blocks away from the Marquette University campus. When I walked through the door, the clerk was blasting the very newest record from the Minneapolis band Husker. In this case, they were playing side one of the album Flip Your Wig. It was loud, it was fast, it was melodic as hell. In short, it was freaking awesome. And like so many times in my lifetime, I immediately grabbed a copy of that record that I heard throughout the store and was ready to buy it. Oddly enough, I wound up not buying that record that day because, like so many times before, I listened to the clerk who said to me, "Dude, that album sucks next to Husker Du's Zen Arcade." Now, the truth is that nearly every album sucks next to Husker Du's Zen Arcade. But Flip Your Wig was really good too, and I didn't have a whole lot of money at the time to where I could buy both. But I didn't want to be judged by the record store guy, so I said, "Yeah, you're right, I guess so. The album does suck." And then I grabbed Zen Arcade instead. Now, the truth is, Zen Arcade was, in fact, a life-changing record store purchase. But 2 days later, I still wound up buying Flip Your Wig and their album New Day Rising. In other words, I was hooked on Husker Du, eventually buying everything that they would release and everything that Bob Mould and the late Grant Hart would release as well, because honestly, they were two of my favorite songwriters ever. In 1987, I finally got a chance to see Husker Du live. Unfortunately, the band would break up 8 months later, but my God, they were just so damn great. Now, admittedly, I didn't do a particularly good job keeping up with bass player Greg Norton, partially due to the fact that he had taken a break from music to work in the restaurant business. That was until about 2 years ago, when Greg joined guitar player Finney McConnell from the Canadian folk punk band The Mahones and drummer Jamie Oliver from the UK Subs. The name of the band was called Ultrabomb, and 2 months later, they would release their first album, Time to Burn. Yes, I said 2 months later. And to say it kicked ass is putting it quite mildly. The record was awesome, especially their killer single, Stickman versus Hangman. This sounded like a band that had been playing together for years, not a band that had been playing together for a matter of days. This month, Ultrabomb released their second album, Dying to Smile, which, if I'm being honest, is just as great as the first record. It's a record that any fan of the Mahones, Husker Du, and the UK Subs would absolutely enjoy. So for the last 39 years, having been a huge fan of Husker Du and quickly becoming a fan of Ultrabomb, it was freaking awesome to talk to Greg Norton on Baxy's Musical Podcast. I'm so jacked to have you here. I've been a fan for, I think, since the Stone Age. So to have you here is fantastic. So thank you very much for agreeing to do it.
Hey, I'm like honored that, you wanted to talk to me. It's, I follow your podcast, so this is awesome.
Well, I've noticed you've been liking things on Facebook and Instagram. Like every time I see your name, like, oh shit, that's so cool. That's awesome. So I've been listening to actually both Ultrabomb records over the last couple of weeks, Time to Burn and the new one. And it's funny because I'm thinking back to when I first learned that like Husker Du's Zen Arcade was recorded mostly in one or two takes. And I remember thinking at the time, well, what do you mean? I mean, how is it even possible? And then now you're in a band where you started, recording your first record with guys you had never met face to face, and finishing a record, a week or so later. And I'm thinking, well, what do you mean? How is that even possible? It's like, I don't know what kind of sorcery you're dealing with over there, Greg, but I mean, it's an incredible story of how this band gets together. Tell me about how it all started with Jamie and Finney.
Well, I basically got introduced to the Mahones because they covered "Makes No Sense at All," and it popped up on Facebook one day, and I liked the post, and then this was like in 2015, and Finney has, I mean, he's been a huge Husker Du fan since he was 18, and he's like, oh, holy shit, Greg Norton liked my video, so he sent me a friend request, and then he messaged me, and I messaged back, and I'm like, well, yeah, it was really good, but you didn't get the bass part right, and and he laughed, and he's like, well, I recorded the bass, and it's like, well, maybe one day I'll show you how to play it right. And so we just started corresponding back and forth, and a friendship developed there. And the summer of 2021, the band I had been playing with for the previous 5 years, Minneapolis group called Porcupine, things just didn't really work out there. The guy who was the band leader, was his band, decided to change things up and go in a different direction with some other guys. And Finney saw that and sent me a message. It's like, oh, you're not playing any music right now. You should be. It's like, I've got this idea. You want to start a band with Jamie Oliver. He's the greatest punk rock drummer on the planet. And at the same time, he sent Jamie a message going like, hey, you want to be in a band with Greg Norton from Husker Du? And so both of us said, well, yeah, shit, yeah, let's do this. So the original concept was just, let's get together. We'll have some laughs. We'll just play, Husker covers and Mahones covers, and toss in some UK subs, and maybe we can, play some festivals and just have fun. We came up with the name. The three of us started, doing, FaceTime Messenger, and it was about 6 weeks later, Finney's was like, hey, I'm going to be in Berlin for a few weeks. And he was living in Germany at the time with a girlfriend. And he's like, yeah, and just so happens Jamie's going to be in Berlin over the same amount of time. Sorry, that's my dog, Sir
okay.
Jackson.
That's okay.
His name is Sir Jackson Husker Doodle. But so anyway, I got to thinking, it's like, all right, both these guys are in Berlin. Benny's got studio time to book. He was thinking about, just laying down some demos for possible Ultrabomb songs. And I decided, I should go to Berlin and meet these guys just to see if this is actually something real. And so, yeah, literally the first time the three of us had ever been in a room together was that first day in the studio. And, we wrote 10 songs in 2 days, and it just felt like we had been playing together forever. It felt like, we were old friends. The engineer was like going like, I cannot believe that you just wrote that song. And I'm like, I just met these guys, type of thing. And we really felt like we in 4 days, we laid down a punk rock classic. And stupidly, we decided to try to put it out ourselves. We learned a hard lesson there. Apologies to all the fans that waited forever to get their records. And then my friend Darren Heeman at DC Jam, he wanted to put the first record out. So when he heard that we were getting ready to go out on the road, and in last December in England, he's like, you know what, I'll take care of the studio time if you guys want to get in and record a second record, and I'll put it out. So booked another 4 days, and this time at Perry Vale Studios in London with Pat Collier, who was the original bass player for the Vibrators.
Right.
He's got a great studio, and he's really an excellent engineer, producer. And again, we went in, we had 4 days, we wrote 12 songs in the first 2 days and finished it up, and couldn't be happier with how this record has turned out. So not really a formula that we want to continue to push. I think we've gotten really lucky with the first two, but we're really happy. And again, we feel like we recorded another punk rock classic.
It's amazing to listen to, and when this is how it started. I mean, these are, again, you had never met these guys face to face.
Right.
it's one thing to be talking about starting a band. I mean, I know guys who've been in bands for for a dozen years. They never sound that good. You guys are there for like a dozen minutes, and all of a sudden you're ripping songs out. I mean, it's amazing that the chemistry was just right and everything just aligned. I mean, it's really kind of unheard of that you guys could play at that level and sound so. I mean, you sound like you've been together for 20 years.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, it felt like we'd been playing together forever. It really, for me, it brought back feelings of those early days, early Husker days, when all we would do is just practice and write songs. And, uh, I think part of one of the reasons, the fact that all of us have a long history and we've got a deep musical vocabulary, that it just really came naturally. And I think that's one of the reasons why both records, the material sounds fresh. It doesn't sound like we're just trying to do a retread of something. I think, you see a lot of, guys get together and put together a record and it just kind of sounds like, all right, well, they're just kind of punk by numbers, or, they're just trying to sound exactly like something that happened 30, 40 years ago. For us, I think it does still capture a youthful exuberance in our desire to create great fucking punk rock. And as far as I can tell, most of the listeners concur with that.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, I was listening to the first single off the new record, "Rage Bomb," which which sounds unbelievable, but it's the kind of song, like you say. I mean, there are elements of it that you can see where fans of Husker Du, the Mahones, and the UK subs will all appreciate without sounding derivative of itself. It doesn't sound like you're copying old stuff. It does have that freshness of a band that it meant to be. Tell me about that song in particular.
well, Rage Bomb. I believe everybody has a rage bomb in their brain, and sometimes it goes off, and in those moments, people say things that you can't take back. It's like, oh, all right, well, that's out now. I guess I know where things really stand now. You pretty made that pretty clear. So, just kind of thinking about it in those terms, and it gets to the, to the chorus. It's like music only screams at me if I want it to. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to get screamed at unless I want to get screamed at. I'm going to put this this record on and let it rage at me. So it's kind of like, all right, we all have that. Let's keep it in check. And if I want to get screamed at, I'm going to put on a record.
One of the things that you did in both records, which I thought was very, very cool, at the end of the first record, you did the cover of Sonic Reducer from the Dead Boys, or Rocket from the Tombs, whoever you want to cite the,
Right.
The start of that, and it was unbelievable. But in the new record, you did something very similar by doing a song by the Ruts, which is like, oh my god, that's so freaking cool that someone's doing something by the Ruts, and you chose like something that was not on the Crack, but in a Rut, and it's just. I was like so blown away by it because it sounded great, and I was like, "What a great choice!" What made you guys decide either one of those songs?
Well, so in Berlin, after the second night of recording, we went out to get a bite to eat, and we're talking about like, hey, it'd be kind of fun. Let's to cover something. It's sort of like like a bonus track type of thing, and we were like kicking around ideas, and I had suggested Sonic Reducer, and immediately everybody's like, yes, Sonic Reducer, that's the one. I sing that one. I definitely think I channel more David Thomas from Rocket from the Tombs in my vocal stylings than Steve Bader's. And again, that was like so much fun to record, and we knocked that out in just a couple of takes. Jamie was actually the only one in the band who had ever played it with somebody. And so Finney and I learned it. We played it a couple of times, recorded it. I think the vocal take might have been the first take that we did.
Really?
And and it just turned out so great. And that's a fun one to play live as well. So when we went into the studio in London, we were like, yeah, let's do another cover. And we were like trying to decide Finney's like, well, I think we should, pick a British band because we're recording in London, and we, kicked around a couple of ideas, and then it's like, oh, perfect song, The Ruts in a Rut. You know, the Ruts may not be that well known in America, but for UK and European punks, that song is an anthem. So we're like, yeah, let's record that one. And it was so natural playing it.
Yeah.
And and Finney does a great job with the guitars on it. And it was just a lot of fun. So
Well, there's such great choices. I mean, I love the Ruts, but Rocket from the Tombs. I mean, I've talked to Cheetah, Chrome, and Craig Bell from that band, and just I think the first time I heard that Sonic Reducer came from another band that had David Thomas in it. I think the first time I heard that, I'm like, again, how is that possible? And just
Yep.
an amazing band that I wish I could have seen or heard in that
Oh
first
yeah, for sure.
incarnation.
Well, they were definitely the greatest American punk band that never actually put a record out. Uh, and the story is so crazy, and it's like Stiv was a friend of Cheetah's that was hanging around like at their shows and stuff like that. So just the fact that from Rocket from the Tombs you end up with Para Ubu and the Dead Boys is mind blowing to
It
me
is.
as well.
It's totally mind blowing. So in 1985, I remember going into a record store in Milwaukee. I went to school out there, and it went into a record store, and they were playing "Flip Your Wig," which is like had come out like that day or the day before, and it was the first time I heard anything from it, and I thought, well, I want to get that record, so I grabbed the record, and the clerk said, "You don't want this one. This one sucks next to Zen Arcade." So as I'm a customer, and of course I'm easily swayed by any record store clerk, and I'm thinking, yeah, you're right. I don't know what I was thinking, so I bought Zen Arcade, and then played the hell out of it for the next 2 days. Then went back to the record store, got Flip Your Wig and New Day Rising at the same time, and it's like, I know you worked in record stores early on. Was he right? Was that a good recommendation to pick Zen Arcade first over the other two?
I don't know if he was necessarily correct, but he wasn't wrong.
No, he wasn't wrong.
It, it's interesting. I always like reading through threads on Facebook with people talking about like what their favorite Husker record is or what their first Husker record was, and Zen Arcade obviously is like way up there because it was such an important record as you look back at the history of punk rock, and the fact that it really had a deep, meaningful impact on so many people and helped so many people, which I'm always really grateful to have people, tell me their stories about that. But it's like 1980. Zen Arcade came out in '84, and then we followed it up in '85 with two records. New Day Rising at the beginning of the year, Flip Your Wig at the end of the year. I've had people tell me like 1985 was the year that Husker Du changed music, and you look at those three records in that arc, and I think it's a valid point, a valid argument. So all of the people that were influenced to buy those records and motivated to start bands, and just the roster of great, incredible bands that were inspired by those records that followed, and you just it's an all-star roster. It's like everybody knows those bands because they're huge.
The legacy of Husker Du, I think, is really hard to overstate in the sense of who, like you say, like who it inspired and the people that really loved it. I mean, between Bob and Grant, I mean, they were emerging as like the two great songwriters of that entire generation. As a guy who's in the middle of all of this, and you're playing on these incredible records, and people are starting to notice the greatness of Husker Du. Tell me about that, to be kind of like in the middle of it, like, because right after that, all of a sudden now you're being pursued a little bit by major record companies for whatever reason that they went after you. But it's like it had to be just like an amazing out of body experience to be going through all of this so quickly.
It was. playing with Bob and Grant was an amazing experience. It's like just watching Bob play guitar every night, and I remember early on at a show and watching and thinking like, I'm in a band with the punk rock Jimi Hendrix. What the hell is going on here? It's like, how is this my life right now? But Husker started. Obviously, I was more involved in songwriting earlier in the days, but those were also the days where Bob was learning how to write songs, and he was so prolific and wrote so many songs, and kept getting better and better and better at it. And Grant always had a great ear for writing, catchy stuff, maybe a little bit more poppier than Bob's stuff. And he might have been a little slower to bring material forward, but more of his stuff was stuff that stuck, and like I said, Bob and Bob is still so prolific. I'm sure Bob probably has, 3-4 times as many songs that have never been released than have been. But it's interesting because as through 1985, starting to get more and more major label consideration, and ultimately deciding to sign with Warner Brothers because we felt that they were the most artist friendly, and the label that we're like, we're not gonna, you guys just do your thing. We'll, we're not gonna mess with you in the studio. We're not gonna, tell you what to do. You guys just make great records and we'll put them out, type of thing. But at that point, the kind of the battle, the songwriting battle between Bob and Grant was now in kind of full swing, and it became a lot more difficult for me to bring material forward, just because they were very focused on getting as many of their songs on the record as possible. And it was, like the song Every Time that ended up being a non-LP B-side on a 12-inch in the UK, not even in the US, is where Every Time ended up. And Bob was like, I don't know, I just don't hear a spot for it on Warehouse, and it's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to say I was the third best songwriter in Husker Du.
It's not.
I was top 5.
Yeah, well, that's not the worst place to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I remember seeing Husker Du only one time, and again, it was in Milwaukee about 8 months before the band eventually broke up. And I remember, I remember thinking that this is ridiculously loud, but also insanely great at the same time. And I've talked to Bob about this, that the end of Husker Du was profoundly sad for all of you, but that he really felt that at the time that it was definitely time to go, and Grant's health certainly was not, it was certainly part of it, but not the whole picture. How tough had things gotten in that band, and do you think there would have been any way that you could have survived that and continued on past Warehouse?
Well, we were actually scheduled to head into the studio in the beginning of 1988. We're actually going to go and record the third Warner Brothers album in London, and it would have been the first time that we would have used an outside producer. We were going to record with Hugh Jones, but we, from the beginning of that band, we always were like, let's just keep doing this until it, as long as it continues to be fun. And the tensions between Bob and Grant, being on a major label brings a whole new level of stressors. And we were a band that was always DIY in all of the aspects. We had a booking agent before we signed it to Warner's, but once we got to Warner's, it's like, all right, we have to have outside management. So now you've got outside management, you've got your booking agent, you've got all of these things that we used to do ourselves were slowly being kind of taken out of our hands. And the idea, of course, is like, well, now you have time just to be a musician. But I think having all of that time and those responsibilities delegated out to other people, I think was a big factor in Grant, and his expanding drug use.
Mhm.
And it's also one of those things. It's like, all right, now we're traveling. We all have separate rooms where, it's, you're together, but you're not together.
Right.
So there's more. Everybody ends up in their own silo. We're not all necessarily communicating as well as we used to. I think I think it's one of those things. If Grant would have, could have been happy with being like, all right, Bob's the major contributor to the band, and kind of settle into like, all right, I'm the next guy. I think possibly we could have worked that out and moved forward, but it just
Yeah.
wasn't possible. And so, yeah, it's like the way it went down. For me, I felt it was like we were just like a bug just flying along, and all of a sudden a semi came through and we met the windshield.
Yeah.
It was such a quick implosion. I mean, I had suggested to Bob that, like, well, maybe we can replace Grant and keep doing this. And he's like, nah, it just wouldn't be right. Of course, in Bob's book, he says that he had the same conversation with Grant about replacing me. So who knows? But I think a lot of really great music continued to get made. You look at Bob's entire career, everything that he's done. The fact that the Bob Mold Band is the longest running band, a consistent band that Bob has had for his entire career. You look at the records that Grant put out, he still, put out a lot of great stuff with Nova Mob. He put out a lot of great solo stuff. He had Godspeed You Black Emperor as his backing band. I mean, that's like crazy to think about. And the fact that now I'm back with Ultrabomb, and Ultrabomb is making really great music. It's, I think that's a bonus for all of the Husker fans.
I totally agree. After all of that happened, 87 and 88, when things just, started to fall apart, at some point you kind of scale back and you step away from music. You get into the restaurant business. You own a restaurant in Minnesota at one point. I mean, that is probably the most most stressful industry you could go into. But
Yeah,
I mean,
it's so many similarities between playing music and running a restaurant, a commercial kitchen. So
yeah. Did you feel? I mean, did you feel like you had to kind of step away from music at that point, or did you feel like? I mean, what were your thoughts at that point? Did you feel like you had no other choice, or you just feel like, I've had enough for now?
it was kind of a lot of all of those things. I didn't necessarily think like, all right, well, that's it. I'm done with music. I need to find a new career type of thing. I had become friends with Lenny Russo, who is, he's one of the top chefs in the Midwest, nominated numerous times for best chef in the Midwest, but always ultimately losing out to somebody either from Chicago or Kansas City. But he was a really good friend, and he's like, got me working in one of his kitchens, and it's like, you've got a really good palate. You can't teach people palate. You've got a really great aptitude for this. So just be a sponge, learn as much as you can. So I was lucky that I was in a situation where I learned from some really great chefs. I had a 15-year run as a chef and a restaurant owner, but also in that time, it was a lot of, 60, 70, 80 hour weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I went 14 years without even picking up a bass. And, and then once I did start playing again, I realized it's like, okay, this is something that's been missing. This is something that brings me joy, and I should do more of this. And now I'm at a point where that I'm okay at it.
Yeah.
I think I do a fairly good job.
Yeah.
And this is the only thing I want to do now is to write music and play live and tour. And Ultrabomb, we're pretty damn good live.
Yeah.
We are absolutely convinced we're playing the best punk rock on the planet at the moment.
You were scheduled to go on tour the last time around in 2022, and then before or soon after you started, you got diagnosed with prostate cancer. I assume because of the level in which you are now kicking ass that you have a full, complete, clean bill of health. Tell me how you're feeling, how you're doing.
Yes, that is correct. So Yeah, I got lucky, and something popped up on a routine blood test with a that led to a follow up with a urologist, which led to another follow up, and diagnosed with prostate cancer, but it was all contained to the prostate from the MRIs, and had my prostate removed basically 2 years ago. I feel great. My they're convinced that my margins were clean, and I've been in. Actually, I feel like I'm in some of the best health that I have been since I was younger. So, yeah, the energy levels there. I'm just happy to be out and playing.
Yeah.
I think being able to go out and play is a big part of that as well.
You've been playing music since the age of 17, 18 years old. And over the years, your perspective on things changes over time. Yeah. How is making music now different for you today than, say, in 1982, 85, or whatever? I mean, do you just have a different sense of what you do now than you did before, or is it very similar to what you were experiencing, in your younger years?
Well, definitely with Ultrabomb, it's got that same feeling of excitement and ease. But definitely recording now is everything's digital. There's no tapes involved. You can email people stems to work on in a studio at halfway around the world. And touring is different now as well, because it's back in the 80s we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have internet, we had notebooks with full of random phone numbers that you would collect from people on the road, a pocket full of quarters for for a payphone, and a Rand McNally road atlas that would be like really beat up, because that's how you got around. The one thing I kind of don't like about how things are now, back then you'd find a place to play, you'd go and you'd play it, and all of these people would show up because that's how they discovered new bands, and they would go out and support. Now with streaming services and the internet, people have the ability, if you don't catch their ear right away, they just swipe on to the next thing. And it also kind of, in a sad way, I see a lot of shows where there'll be a handful of local bands, and each band will bring their group of friends, but then they don't stick around, they all leave. And it's like, I don't really understand that. I'd like to see people stick around and support the community a little bit better. But you also have those pockets of community that still exist, though, where it doesn't matter what type of music you're playing, people are there and they're going to support you.
I always thought it was interesting, like, the old DIY thing, back in the 80s and late 70s, was actually, in a way, like its own insular social network all by itself. I mean, and it really kind of was. I mean, like you said, you all had notes, you all had phone numbers. You can stay on my couch, I'll stay on your couch, that kind of thing.
Sure, yeah.
It's similar today, but obviously, with it being more digital, it's like you don't have to work as hard to maybe get to get yourself around. But it does seem like there is some similarities to at least that. At least there are word of mouth is a little bit faster than it used to be.
Yeah, I think so. And there again, it's like going viral. It's like you have something that people really like, and all of a sudden it can spread like wildfire. But on the same token, I think it's also a lot easier for a band to just toil away and anonymously, where people aren't really noticing them. So I guess it all depends on getting people excited and having it shared on their socials, and the beast that the algorithm is, that it constantly needs to be fed with positive reinforcement. Like it, share it, subscribe to it, follow it, comment, and then responding to those comments. All of those things push it up in the feeds, and it's kind of how it is now.
Well, Greg, I gotta say, "Dying to Smile" is a great record. The first record was fantastic. I mean, it's an amazing story of three world class musicians getting together and just blowing it up. I think it's amazing what you guys have done, and I can't wait to hear more of it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm, we already have the next record um, composed. So it's just a matter of, actually, I joked, I was like, wow, what do you think we'd do if we had 8 days in the studio? And it's like, probably record a double album.
You probably would. Greg, it's a real pleasure to talk to you. I wish you guys all the best of luck with this, and it's great to know you're doing good too.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That means a lot to me, and thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
My pleasure. The name of the new record from Ultrabomb is called Dying to Smile. It is awesome. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, follow along, like it, share it, review it, tell everyone you know about it. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook for regular updates. You can also email me at bax@rock102.com. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks to Metro, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram at Chicopee, and thanks to you for listening to Baxy's Musical Podcast.